They called it holy, but not everything they bless is truly from heaven. I need you to listen to me now, not with your ears, but with your soul, because if this object is near your bed, your dreams may not be yours, and the things entering them, not invited by God. What I am about to say, no priest will mention, no church bulletin will ever print. And yet, I saw it again and again. Souls tormented not by sin, but by silence. Objects they thought were sacred, gifts they were told would protect them. But at night, they whispered, they moved, they waited, and the people who owned them were never the same again. You weren't supposed to know this. That's why the enemy placed it where you'd never suspect, at the center of your devotion. And that is why it's still beside your bed. Even now, before we go further, tell me, have you ever felt watched while you sleep, even though you were alone? Tell me below. You may not be the only one, and that is why I must reveal this now, because heaven pressed it on my soul, because someone listening has just seconds before they bring it home tonight. You see, not all crucifixes are made with clean hands. Not all statues are carved by hearts that serve God. Some are shaped in silence, blessed in imitation, and sold with a smile. They don't carry the spirit of heaven. They carry the scent of the one who crafted them, and some of those hands were not human. You think I exaggerate? I wish I were. But you must understand, when I heard confessions, I didn't just hear sins, I felt spirits. And when someone said, I don't sleep well anymore, or I feel watched, or my child cries at night without cause, I already knew. A door had been opened, and it was opened by something in their home, something they let too close. It usually started like this. A woman receives a blessed object from her aunt, a small statue of Mary, or a cross with a relic. She places it near her bed. That night she dreams of shadows. The next day she dismisses it. But the dreams return, darker now. And every night she places her rosary beside that object, hoping it will help. But her prayers feel dry. Her sleep grows restless, her thoughts intrusive, and eventually she begins to feel it even when awake. A heaviness, a coldness near her chest. And all this time, she never thinks to question the object because it looks holy. It looks safe. But this is the trap, because some doors are open not by intention, but by proximity. Some spirits don't need your invitation. They just need your ignorance. Let me tell you something no one wants to say. The enemy doesn't always enter through sin. Sometimes he enters through trust, through gifts, through symbols that were once sacred but have been defiled. I remember one man, trembling before me in confession, whispering, "Padre, I didn't know. I didn't know the statue I bought used to belong to someone who practiced the occult." But it was too late. His daughter had already begun speaking in her sleep. His wife was waking with bruises she couldn't explain. And every night, their crucifix hung above their heads, watching, silent, heavy, cold. That statue didn't just remind them of faith, it became a beacon, a lighthouse not for angels but for spirits that roam seeking homes with open doors. You think this doesn't apply to you? You think your house is protected? But tell me this, do you know where every object near your bed came from? Who touched it before you? Who prayed over it or cursed it? Some of you are sleeping beside items that were never prayed over, only passed around. Some of you placed them next to your Bible, your rosary, your wedding photo, thinking it would sanctify your space. But the darkness didn't flee, it stayed. And every night, it watches you breathe. Every night, it listens for your silence. Because when you stop praying, even for one night, the door cracks wider. You see, the enemy doesn't roar anymore. He whispers, and that's why you're hearing this now. Because something sacred in your life might have become something dangerous. Not because you chose wrong, but because no one ever told you. Until now. This is not a call to fear. It's a call to discernment, because God never intended for you to sleep beside a cursed doorway. You were meant to rest in peace, not spiritual unrest, and that's why I ask you now. Go to your nightstand, look closely, feel it, pray over it, and if your spirit trembles, don't ignore it, because the things we keep near our bed are often the things closest to our soul. This object, you didn't place it there by accident. And heaven didn't let you hear this by chance. Something in your life is being exposed, not to shame you but to protect you. You're not cursed, you were targeted, because your light was too strong, and now, your silence has expired, it's time to act. You want to believe your house is protected, that the prayers you said 5 years ago still guard your room tonight, that the cross above your bed, just because it's there, still radiates light. But light fades when it is not renewed, and not every cross you see carries the blessing you think it does. The object I speak of looks ordinary, reverent even. It may be made of wood or silver. It may have beads or a saint's image. It may even have been gifted to you on the day of your baptism. But somewhere along the way, its covering changed. What it holds now is not the same as what it held then. Because something, someone, passed their pain through it, their fear, their rebellion, and objects, unlike people, never confess. They absorb, they remember, they wait. There was once a woman who came to me trembling, her hands clutching a rosary so tightly her fingers had turned white. She said, "Padre, I cannot sleep anymore. Every night it watches me. I don't know what it is, but I feel it, right by my bed." I asked her when it began. She said, "After I brought home the rosary from my grandmother's drawer." She said it had been blessed, that it protected her, but the night I placed it next to my pillow, I dreamed of something standing in my room. I asked what it looked like. She whispered it had no face. I told her to bring it. When I held it in my hands, my chest tightened, my breath shortened, and I knew that rosary had been touched by something grieving, something tormented, and something else that had entered through her grandmother's despair. The object had become a spiritual transfer point, not because of its form but because of what was done through it. The faith that once protected it had turned into superstition. The prayers once whispered through it had been replaced by bargaining, by fear, and what remained was not blessing but residue. I tell you this because someone listening has done the same. You've kept something because it belonged to someone you loved. You told yourself it's just an item, just a keepsake, but it sits there, every night, beside your sleep, carrying a presence that does not belong to you. And the longer it stays, the more your atmosphere changes. It begins with small things. A shadow in the corner you think you imagined. A weight on your chest when you lie down. A dream that feels more like a memory. Then, the prayers don't come as easily. The scriptures feel dry. You wake up angry, or sad, or afraid, and you don't know why. Your child says they heard something whisper. Your pet refuses to enter your room, but you keep going. You keep explaining it away because the object looks holy, because the cross still hangs. But that's how the enemy moves now. He no longer removes the symbols, he infects them. One night while praying alone, I saw in the spirit something that still chills me. A bedroom, dimly lit. A single crucifix on the wall, a woman asleep, breathing steadily. But the crucifix, it was not still. Its shadow moved independently from the light. Not violently, not loudly, just enough to whisper to the room. And that whisper reached her dreams. The door was open, not in the wall, but in the spirit, and through that door came things not sent by heaven. I wanted to shout, to wake her. But the vision faded. When I met her 2 weeks later in confession, she wept and said, "Padre, I haven't slept in 10 days, and I think something wants me to leave my faith." I knew then it had begun. Objects open portals when they carry unresolved spirits, when they've become relics of fear, and when they are placed beside your rest, your unguarded hours. Your soul becomes vulnerable, because the enemy waits for silence. He waits for fatigue. He waits until your guard is down. That's why so many attacks come at night. That's why so many once faithful souls now wake up lost. It wasn't sin, it wasn't rebellion, it was placement, proximity. They placed something beside their head that should have never entered their home. And it stayed. Not because they worshipped it, but because they trusted it. And trust, when misplaced, becomes a doorway. I am not telling you to fear every object. I am telling you to test them. Because spiritual doors don't look like doors. They look like gifts. They look like heirlooms. They look like acts of love. But love without discernment can become danger. Ask yourself this: when you pray beside it, does peace come? When you hold it, does your spirit rise or recoil? When you sleep near it, do you wake refreshed or restless? And if your answers are unclear, you must act. Because heaven will not protect what you defend in ignorance. You have heard now. You know, and with knowing comes responsibility. There is someone who's listening right now whose hands are beginning to sweat, whose heart is beating faster. That's not fear, that's recognition. Your spirit has known this truth for a long time, but no one ever confirmed it. Until now. That object near your bed was never neutral, it was waiting. And tonight may be your last chance to move it before the door it holds grows wider. You must understand, the enemy studies our rituals, he mimics them. That's why cursed objects often look the holiest, because he knows we won't question them. That's why he hides in the familiar. Because what's familiar rarely gets discerned. But today, the familiar has been unmasked, and now, you must decide, will you act? Or will you sleep beside the door one more night, hoping it closes on its own? You've prayed, you've fasted, and yet, you still wake up tired. Not just in your body, but in your soul. A fog you can't shake, a silence you can't name. And you wonder, silently, what changed? What if you've been carrying something that feeds while you sleep, something that drains you, not in one violent moment, but drop by drop, night after night, until one day, you can no longer feel the presence of God like you used to. You can no longer hear His voice the same way. And you wonder silently, what changed? The answer is simple. Nothing in heaven changed. But something in your room did. Something near your bed stayed too long. And now, it's feeding. Spiritual exhaustion doesn't come with flashing signs. It doesn't shout. It whispers through dull prayers. It moves through distracted thoughts. It sits beside you during worship and tells you you're alone. And the more you push, the heavier it gets. That's not coincidence. That's design. Because some portals don't unleash chaos immediately. Some let things in that work in silence. Spirits that do not seek to terrify but to wear you out. To make you so numb that when the time comes to resist, you no longer care, you no longer fight, you no longer discern. That's how spiritual warfare wins now, not with possession, but erosion. Not with fear, but fatigue. I met many souls who believed they had failed God, who said, "Padre, I don't feel Him anymore, I think I lost Him." And every time, I asked them the same thing: what's beside your bed? They always looked confused. Some mentioned photographs. Others said crosses or rosaries or candles. But then came the moment they remembered. The one object they never questioned. The one gift they never prayed over. The one thing they assumed was holy, but had never been tested. And when they removed it, something shifted. The air changed. The silence lifted. Their thoughts became lighter. Their prayers returned, not instantly, but steadily, because the exhaustion wasn't theirs. It had been projected. Let me explain this to you in a way few dare to say. Just as the Holy Spirit rests on objects set apart for God, so do dark spirits linger in items that have absorbed grief, bitterness, or rebellion. You think it's only about curses or witchcraft, but sometimes a spiritual portal is held open by trauma, by unresolved loss, by idols of the past disguised as sacred keepsakes. And these items, they don't howl, they hum. They vibrate subtly at the edge of your peace, until one day, you find yourself praying without presence, reading without revelation, singing without feeling, and still never questioning the thing at your bedside, because it's too familiar, too holy-looking, too gifted by someone you love. You must understand, discernment is not suspicion. Discernment is obedience. God doesn't need you to be afraid. He needs you to be aware, because you are in a war. But the battlefield now is quiet, psychological, spiritual, hidden. And the weapon used against you? Fatigue, but not just in your body, in your discernment, in your hunger, in your hope. And if you do not recognize where it's coming from, you will keep trying to fix it with more striving, more performance, more guilt, and the enemy will laugh. Because all he needed was for you to never look under the lamp on your nightstand. All he needed was that you never ask who touched that object last. That you never question why you started dreaming of running, but never arriving. A young man once told me, "Padre, I have prayed the rosary every night for 3 years. But the more I pray, the more distant I feel from God." I asked him, "Where do you keep your rosary?" He said, "Under my pillow." I asked him where it came from. He paused, then said, "I found it in the drawer of a retreat house. I thought it was forgotten." I told him to bring it. When I held it, I felt a cold bitterness, like abandoned faith. I do not say this lightly. That rosary was once used in warfare, but its last owner died in despair, and the object still carried the imprint. Not a curse, not a demon, but an atmosphere, a spiritual tone, and every night that young man pressed it to his chest, he unknowingly re-entered a space of spiritual grief. That's how portals hide, not in screams but in sadness, not in blood but in memory. Now I ask you, look again. Look again. What's under your pillow? What's the object beside your lamp, the one you never question? What's been with you so long, you've stopped noticing it? And tell me, what wakes you up tired again and again with no cause you can name? You think your burnout is from work. But your soul isn't tired from doing too much. It's tired from fighting something invisible, silently, for too long. That's why you cry for no reason. That's why you feel like something's off, when everything seems fine. That's why you feel distant, even when you try to pray, because the door is still open, and what entered it has made a bed near yours. You weren't meant to sleep beside an open gate. You weren't meant to dream under a ceiling laced with sorrow. You were meant to rest in peace. You were meant to sleep in presence. But tonight, someone else has laid claim to your room. Not by storming in, but by being allowed to stay. And unless you confront it, unless you remove what has remained too long, your soul will keep paying the price for someone else's pain. So I ask you again, not with accusation, but with urgency. When did you stop feeling rested? When did prayer start to feel like labor? When did your dreams become heavier than your days? Go back, trace it, mark the night, and then look around. Because the answer is not far. It may be sitting in the same place it's been for years, silent, small, overlooked. But the spirit attached to it is not silent, not anymore. You may not remember when it started, but it did. The moment your dreams began to change, not with horror, but with distortion. Familiar places became darker. Faces you once trusted began to shift. Sacred things began to feel strange. And every time you woke up, something felt missing. You didn't lose sleep. You lost connection. And then came the forgetfulness. You forgot verses you once clung to. You forgot the clarity you once had in prayer. You forgot what it felt like to be at peace in silence. But you didn't forget the dreams, because they weren't just dreams, they were edits. They were fingerprints on your mind. Because when a portal stays open, it doesn't just invite presence, it begins to rewrite perception. I've seen this again and again, people who say, "I don't know what's wrong, Padre, I used to feel so close to him. But now, even my memories of faith feel distant." That's not just distance, that's displacement. Because when an unclean spirit is allowed proximity long enough, it doesn't just haunt your room, it begins to whisper through your memory. It takes your sacred moments and wraps them in fog. It reminds you of every unanswered prayer, but hides every miracle. It highlights your pain, but blurs your purpose, and over time, your mind becomes a mirror you no longer trust. I once sat with a girl who couldn't look me in the eye. She said, "I used to feel so sure. Now I can't even remember what God's voice sounded like." I asked her what changed. She said, "Nothing, except a dream I keep having. I see my childhood bedroom, but it's empty, except for one thing, the cross on the wall. But it's turned upside down." I asked if that cross ever existed. She said, "Yes, it was given to me by a priest when I was 9. I asked where it is now. She said, "Above my headboard. I never moved it." I told her, that dream is not a memory, it's a message. Because the enemy cannot remove the cross from your wall, but he can turn it in your mind, and that's exactly what he's doing now. While you sleep beside the object, the portal stays open, and through that portal comes suggestion, doubt, shame disguised as reflection, questions that didn't come from you, but feel like yours. And the longer you tolerate it, the deeper it roots, until you no longer question the object. You begin to question yourself. And eventually, you begin to question God, not in rage, not in rebellion, but in weariness, in silence. That is the deepest kind of spiritual defeat, not when you curse the heavens, but when you go quiet, because you think heaven has already left. But heaven hasn't left. It's been waiting. Waiting for you to notice. Waiting for you to challenge what has been allowed too long. Waiting for you to say, "This doesn't belong here." Because when you say that, something shifts. The spiritual realm reacts. Because most of the battle is not in casting out, it's in calling out. In identifying the silent thief who's been sitting by your bed disguised as devotion. I must say this clearly. Not every object beside your bed is cursed, but every object holds a story, and stories carry residue. So ask yourself, what story is the item near my pillow telling? Is it pointing upward or pulling inward? Does it lead you to remembrance or to confusion? Some of you are being tormented by objects passed down through generations. Items you were told to treasure, but what if that treasure was tied to bitterness? What if it carried a promise never fulfilled, and now feeds off your unanswered ones? You think it's just a chain, just a picture, just a statue, but in the spirit it's more. It's the last anchor tying your atmosphere to something heaven has already cut off. I once spoke with a woman who said she kept her grandfather's crucifix because it reminded her of childhood. She slept beside it for decades, but when her son turned 13, he began having dreams of being chased, of fire, of faceless figures standing at his door. He became withdrawn. She prayed, fasted, anointed his room. Nothing worked, until one day while cleaning she knocked the crucifix off the shelf, and something sharp fell out from behind it. A hidden compartment holding a tiny symbol. Not Christian, not blessed. Something else, something she never knew was there. Her grandfather, before conversion, had been part of a secret fraternity, He had hidden it, but the object had remembered, and her son had inherited the door. That's how deep this runs. Generational, emotional, spiritual. And it often hides in plain sight, because the enemy no longer needs to hide in shadows. He hides in tradition, in sentiment, in memory, and you guard it, because it reminds you of someone you loved. But love without light becomes bondage. That's why some of you feel emotionally trapped when you try to throw certain things away. That's why your hands shake when you even think about removing it. Because the object is not just physical. It's become tethered to your identity, and the enemy knows. If you won't let go of it, he doesn't have to leave either. You must understand, objects don't have power on their own, but they can carry agreement. They can echo covenants that were never broken. They can host atmospheres never purified. And if they remain untested, they remain active, even in silence. Especially in silence. That's why the dreams keep coming. That's why the heaviness doesn't lift. Because what's beside you is speaking while you sleep. So tonight, before you close your eyes again, do this. Look around your room. Turn on the light. Ask the Holy Spirit, what in here was never meant to stay? And then listen, not with your logic, but with your peace. Because whatever disturbs it was never from God. And when you find it, don't hesitate. Remove it. Break agreement. Reclaim the silence. Because until that door is closed, your dreams will not belong to you. Your memory will keep shifting. And the exhaustion will return, not because you're weak, but because the war has never been about your strength. It's always been about your awareness. You've carried it long enough. The fog, the fatigue, the flickers of doubt you were too ashamed to voice, the prayers that never reached your ceiling, the dreams that never brought rest. You've endured it because you thought it was your cross. You thought the exhaustion was spiritual maturity, that the silence was divine testing, that the sadness was a consequence of deeper faith. But no, this was never God's weight for you to carry. This was theft, slow, subtle, sacred-looking, and now it ends. You don't need another sermon. You don't need a priest to confirm it. You already know. Your spirit knew the moment you walked into your room tonight and paused. Not because something felt holy, but because something felt off. You knew when your hand brushed that object and your stomach turned. You knew when your child said they didn't want to sleep there anymore. You knew when you kept waking at 3:00 a.m., heart pounding, thoughts racing, and nothing made sense. You weren't paranoid. You were perceiving. And tonight, heaven is no longer letting you ignore it. This isn't deliverance in the way you think. There will be no shouting, no oil, no shaking. Because some doors don't require violence. They require awareness. And once you name the object, once you confront the agreement, it begins to lose its permission to stay. Because the demonic doesn't hold power by force. It holds power by access. And access is only sustained by your silence. That's why it waited so long for you to say nothing. That's why it hid in what you loved. But tonight, you're going to say it. You're going to point to the thing beside your bed and say, you don't belong here anymore. Don't overthink it. You don't need a ritual. You don't need perfect words, just authority. And that doesn't come from emotion. It comes from truth. You belong to heaven. Your room is a sanctuary. Your mind is a temple. And your sleep is not up for negotiation. You are not weak. You are not confused. You are not crazy. You are infiltrated. But now, you are reclaiming your atmosphere, reclaiming your memory, reclaiming the sacred ground of your rest. Because when you reclaim the night, the enemy loses his most prized entrance. Do it simply. Walk to the object. Ask where it came from. Ask what entered through it. Ask what's been echoing off it while you slept. If you feel heaviness, don't ignore it. If you feel fear, press through it. Because fear is often the final guard post. Before the door is shut, the enemy makes noise when he's being evicted. That's all it is, noise. He cannot stop you now. Not anymore. You have seen. You have heard, you have remembered. And when a soul begins to remember, the darkness begins to scatter. One woman told me, "Padre, I couldn't throw it away. I felt like I was betraying someone I loved." I looked at her and said, "You are not dishonoring their memory. You are breaking the agreement they didn't know they made. Some objects must be buried, some must be burned, but all must be removed from the space where you rest, because sacredness is not a feeling. It is a standard, and that standard begins with what you allow in the place you sleep." After she removed it, she told me, "I had my first peaceful sleep in years. But more than that, I remembered something I hadn't in over a decade, a dream I had when I was 12, where Jesus sat beside my bed and whispered something to me. I had forgotten it. Until now, that's what happens when you reclaim the room. You don't just expel the darkness, you recover the light. Memories return. Sensitivity returns. You don't just sleep, you commune. And let me tell you what else returns. Your discernment. Your inner compass that once knew where God was, now begins to pulse again. Your prayers come not from discipline but from desire. Your silence no longer suffocates. It begins to speak, because the war wasn't about your behavior, it was about your atmosphere. And once you clean the air, your soul breathes again. I say this with the full weight of heaven behind me. You have permission to cleanse your room. You don't owe anyone an explanation, not your parents, or not your spouse, not your past. You are the steward of your space. And the enemy trembles when a child of God says, "Not here, not anymore," because that phrase, spoken from a heart awakened, carries more power than 10 deliverance services prayed from fear. So tonight, you will sleep differently. Not because the battle is over, but because the gate is closed. And you will begin to dream again. Not chaotic dreams, not heavy ones, but clean ones, healing ones, visitation level ones. Because your room is no longer a feeding ground, it is a sanctuary again. And when heaven sees that you've made space, it fills it, not with more objects, not with noise, but with presence. And when presence returns, the silence becomes holy again. The night becomes restful. And your soul, for the first time in years, exhales. You will no longer flinch at shadows. You will no longer fear waking up. You will no longer forget the words he spoke to you years ago. They are coming back, one by one, because your room is not haunted anymore. It is holy again. You didn't come across this message by chance. You didn't keep that object because you were stupid. You were simply uninformed, but now you are not. Now you are responsible, but also restored. And this moment, this very moment, is a turning point. Something is being rewritten, not just in your house, in your history. Because what used to drain you will now remind you. What used to silence you will now wake you. What used to haunt you will now testify. You reclaimed the space, but more than that, you reclaimed your soul. They will wonder what changed. They'll notice it, even if you never say it out loud. The light in your eyes, the steadiness in your spirit, the weight that vanished from your voice. They'll ask if you started something new, some routine, some fast, some spiritual secret, and you'll smile. Because it wasn't something you added, it was something you removed. A door, a presence, a silence that did not come from heaven. And once it was gone, God didn't just visit. He returned, not in fire, not in thunder, but in stillness so holy, you could feel it touch your bones. You'll walk into your room now and feel it. The peace, the purity, the clarity. Not because the world changed, but because your sanctuary did. This is the promise I give you, not from myself, but from the one who sees in secret. What you remove in obedience, he replaces with glory, and it will begin tonight. Not with visions, not with lightning, but with rest, real rest. The kind that anchors your soul, the kind that lets you sleep and wake with no panic, no heaviness, no dreams clawing at your mind. Because the thief has been expelled, the silence has been reclaimed, the memories are being restored, and your atmosphere is no longer a battlefield. It is a dwelling place. But listen, this is not just about a single object. This is about a pattern that ends with you, a spiritual inheritance of tolerating darkness disguised as devotion. Your mother may have kept it. Your grandmother may have passed it down. Your church may have never warned you. But heaven chose you to end it. Heaven trusted you to see it. And now heaven has anointed you to break it. And in doing so, you are cleansing more than a room. You are cleansing a bloodline. I see it now, even as I speak. There are angels stationed at the corners of your room. Not figurines, not images, presence, sentinels, silent, watching, guarding. Because they recognize what's been done here. A house once compromised has become a house consecrated, and that shift echoes into your sleep, into your children's dreams, into the prayers you haven't even prayed yet, and long after you forget this moment, the heavens will remember it. But don't stop here. Let this be the beginning of new awareness. Let this wake up your discernment again. From now on, you don't accept every gift without question. From now on, you don't place items near your bed unless peace confirms them. From now on, your silence will speak with authority, and your atmosphere will tell the enemy, you no longer belong here. There is one last thing I must tell you. Because you are no longer in the dark. You've seen the trap. You've broken the silence. And now, the enemy will test you. He may try to return, through dreams, through objects, through people who mean well but carry residue. But listen closely to me. You will not be caught unaware again. Because now you see. Now you know. And knowledge blessed by heaven is not just information. It is armor. You wear it now, whether you feel it or not. And when the whispers return, you will recognize them. And you will say calmly, without fear, I remember what this is. And I remember who told me how to end it. That is what this moment truly is. Not a teaching, not a warning, a remembering, a return to the moment when your spirit first discerned something was wrong, but no one confirmed it. Now you've been confirmed. Now the veil has been torn, and that cannot be undone. You are not just free, you are marked, chosen, trusted, and the space around your bed is now sacred ground. So sleep now. Let your room exhale, let your memory rest. The shadows that once lingered no longer have a place. The prayers you whisper tonight will rise higher. The angels will listen closer. And in the night, if you feel a breeze touch your face or a warmth settle on your chest, know that it is not your imagination. It is the evidence that heaven remembered you, that Padre Pio did not forget you, that God, even in your silence, had already begun preparing this moment. There will be dreams again. But this time, they will not drain you. They will build you. They will not confuse. They will confirm, and when you wake, and when, you will know, something sacred happened in the dark. You will rise not with dread, but with direction. Not with fear, but with fire. And those around you will sense it. They'll feel the shift. They'll ask what changed. And if you choose to tell them, say this: I didn't find a secret. I remembered who the room belongs to. And the one who understood by your bed waiting in silence will never return again. Because now you've closed the door, and heaven has stayed.